Morning, everyone. We are so excited to welcome you all to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. This webinar is titled Local Leaders, Lasting Impact, Child Care Solutions Across Ohio. We wanted to start with a little bit of information about us. My name is Marty Ridley. I am Digital Communications Director at Groundwork Ohio. And today's webinar is proudly presented by Groundwork, obviously. We are a committed, nonpartisan public policy research and advocacy organization formed in 2004. Groundwork Ohio focuses on the prenatal to age 5 period, and we champion high quality early learning and healthy development strategies that lay a really strong foundation for Ohio's kids, families, and communities. We engage, educate, and mobilize diverse stakeholders and strategic partners to promote data-driven and evidence-based early childhood policies. And that is how Groundwork Ohio advances quality early childhood systems in Ohio. A little bit of housekeeping for us so that you know today's webinar is being recorded. We will make sure that all of our attendees have access to the recording after. We will have closed captioning, and that's available in your Zoom settings. All participants will be muted for right now, and we do ask that you use the Q&A function for any questions. You can type those in at any time during our presentation. If we can't get to your request or question during the event, we'll follow up after the event if you provide your email address with your question. All participants will receive a recording of the webinar along with materials, and that will be shared via email after the event has concluded. All right, so this is our agenda for the next hour. Up next, we will hear a state budget update from my colleague, Melissa Harris, Policy Associate for Groundwork Ohio. And then Vanessa Butler, our Senior Director of Community Relations, will present key findings about childcare and highlights of engagement by our local policymakers. After that, Vanessa will moderate today's panel discussion, which features our esteemed guests, Mayor Christina Muryn from the City of Findlay and Mayor Sharetta Smith from the City of Lima. We will save some time at the end for questions and answers. And remember that you don't have to wait until the end. So if a question pops up for you, just feel free to enter that question into your Q&A tool, and we will address it during Q&A time. I am happy to introduce you to my colleague. Oops, sorry. I'm happy to introduce you to my colleague, Melissa Harris, to get us started. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Marty. Hi, everyone. I just want to take a couple minutes and share a quick update on Ohio's final state budget and what that means for our youngest children and families. There will be a link shared in the chat with a more in-depth summary of the budget updates. The good news is that there were some important investments. There was $200 million for the new Child Care Choice Voucher Program, expanding access to 20,000 more children. Publicly funded child care payments will now be based on enrollment, not attendance, improving stability for providers. There is an increase for early literacy, early intervention, Help Me Grow home visiting, infant vitality, and the Fatherhood Commission. There was $1 million to support stable housing for pregnant mothers and $20 million for child wellness campuses for children in crisis. Overall, we're seeing an $8.95 million in new state investments in young children and families, but there are setbacks. The budget did not include a refundable child tax credit. Child care eligibility wasn't expanded to 160% of the federal poverty level. So Ohio still ranks among the lowest in the nation. There is also no additional funding to expand the Family Connects home visiting model. While we're celebrating real progress, it is clear that these wins don't fully meet the growing needs of children and families. Without continued action, Ohio is heading toward a $600 million child care funding cliff in the next biennium as one-time federal relief dollars run out. Groundwork Ohio remains hopeful that these investments reflect a shared commitment to our policy goals and the governor's vision. We're especially grateful to the families who bravely shared their stories to keep children at the center of this conversation. And now I will pass it over to my colleague, Vanessa Butler.
Thank you so much for providing our budget update, Melissa. So at Groundwork Ohio, this is why we do what we do. Our data shows us that the first 5 years of life are foundational because 90% of a child's brain develops before the age of 5. That means the earliest years aren't just important, they're foundational. The quality of interactions and environments have lifelong impact. Public investments during these early years yield some of the highest returns on investment in education, workforce development, and health outcomes. Research shows that high quality experiences between prenatal to 5, in fact, yield a 13% annual return on investment in these key areas. In Ohio, this means that every dollar allocated for these early experiences not only positively impacts our youngest children, but also creates significant economic benefits for our communities. We continue to prioritize these investments and lay the groundwork for a more prosperous and equitable future for Ohio. Ohio has a unique opportunity to invest wisely in early childhood systems that yield social and economic returns. So, when we talk about the early childhood investments, we're not just talking about the first 5 years. We're talking about setting the course for a child's entire life and economic health of our state. And yet, less than 1 in 5 babies from low-income families in Ohio have access to a child care program. By the time kids reach kindergarten, 65% are not ready to learn, and that increases to 79% for low-income children. This doesn't just impact our youngest residents, but their parents and caregivers as well. In fact, 1 million working parents in Ohio have had to reduce their hours because of childcare barriers. Ohio's economy loses $5.48 billion each year on childcare barriers alone. So we have to be intentional in asking ourselves, what does this mean for Ohio's future? If we do not invest now, we will have to pay later. Many local government officials are sounding this alarm. A lack of investment in childcare is creating a crisis. Local leaders across Ohio continue to step up and amplify their voices because the lack of childcare is directly limiting workforce participation and economic growth. So, why are local policymakers from around Ohio and the nation sounding the alarm about the childcare crisis? Because a lack of affordable, accessible childcare is detrimental to the development of our youngest children, the strength of our local businesses and economies, and the future of our communities. For every dollar spent on early childhood programs, cities and counties see a return of $4 to $9 in social and economic benefits. Benefits include increased tax revenue, reduced spending on social services, and long-term gains in workforce productivity. 48% of small business owners say lack of available or affordable childcare affected their ability to recruit and retain employees. Cities and counties across the state want access to affordable, reliable, quality childcare are more attractive to businesses, which in fact seek locations and where in areas where their employees can find quality care. This is especially critical for attracting and retaining younger workers and families in your communities. Employers ultimately want to be in communities where families can thrive. We know that the economic success of cities and counties is linked to a productive workforce. 60% of parents polled in Ohio cite lack of childcare as their reason for leaving the workforce. Additionally, 61% of moms who currently work part-time say they would return back to the workforce full-time if they in fact had access to affordable quality childcare. The gap between needed and available childcare options is creating a workforce crisis that presents intense challenges to businesses on which local economies and communities rely. Affordable, accessible childcare allows parents and guardians to enter and remain in the workforce. Local governments can lead in finding these solutions. Local governments shoulder the costs when children and families are left behind. The impact hits line items in your city, county, and school district budgets. Kids who are less likely to be kindergarten ready are more likely to need intervention services in school. Children who are less likely to graduate high school are more likely to rely on public assistance or be involved in the juvenile justice system. By contrast, when children are supported early, they are more likely to be kindergarten ready, graduate from high school, earn more over their lifetime, and enjoy better health. High quality early childhood programs are not just good for kids and families, they're fiscally responsible. Investments in young children are some of the most effective tools local leaders have to stabilize long-term budgets and strengthen their communities for generations. And to just put this all into perspective, Ohio's lack of affordable childcare results in an estimated 5.48 billion annual loss for Ohio's economy. So all of this led us to ask this question: how can local leaders increase access to affordable quality childcare? We are calling on each of you to be a part of the solution. Act locally. Local governments have the power to create environments where families can thrive, economies can grow, and children can reach their fullest potential. Explore investment of locally held resources into systems that support childcare. Use your convening powers to bridge a multi-sector group of people together to discuss challenges as well as opportunities. We also call you to advocate statewide. Families can't do this alone. Cities and counties need the state of Ohio to step up and embrace the importance of investment in childcare. Fortunately, mayors, county commissioners, and other local government leaders can help influence state government and budget processes in the future, which will determine childcare funding in our state. Recognizing the importance of local action, Groundwork Ohio has partnered with the County Commissioners Association of Ohio to advocate for policies necessary to expand childcare access. CCAO is aligned with Groundwork Ohio's budget priorities for the fiscal year 26 and 27, which included increasing eligibility for publicly funded childcare to 160% of the federal poverty level, and as well as a continuation of the Child Care Choice voucher program for families up to 200% of the federal poverty level. We were also grateful for national entities like NACO and the National League of Cities who continue to center initiatives that provide support and community for local municipalities to continue the hard work of identifying childcare solutions. We've seen exciting momentum across the state. Leaders like Mayor Sharetta Smith, Commissioners Lisa Sabecki and Shannon Jones, as well as Councilwoman Vanice Williams, have stepped up to use their voices and illuminate the childcare crisis through op-eds as well as Groundwork Ohio convenings. We'll drop the links to these op-eds in the chat. Throughout 2024 and 2025, we've seen growing engagement through our stakeholder coalitions as well as our roadshow tour. I want to give a special thanks to Commissioner Julie Amon as well as Councilwoman Vanice Williams for joining us for our in-person Women's Coalition kickoff event, where they shared their lived experiences as local leaders and moms. Through their voices and leadership, they each continue to help normalize childcare as a core infrastructure issue. Their voices and others are crucial. And so now we have the great pleasure of hearing from two more dynamic local leaders in Ohio: Findlay Mayor Christina Muryn and Lima Mayor Sharetta Smith. Mayor Christina Muryn won the mayoral election in 2019 and 2023 and began her second four-year term on January 1st, 2024. Mayor Muryn is recognized across the country for being a common sense, approachable leader who engages with everyone to find solutions to problems. She is regularly invited to the White House and events around the world to engage in meaningful policy discussions on housing, mental health, and community safety, to name a few. She's continuing to increase investment into infrastructure, including focusing on removing lead service lines, which will be complete, which would have been completed in 2024. She also believes in planning for the future and has worked with city departments to implement a 10-year capital improvement plan. Under her leadership, Findlay has continued to be recognized as America's top micropolitan by Site Selection magazine for the 10th consecutive year and is set to continue to be recognized as a top place to live, learn, work, and play. Mayor Sharetta Smith, a fifth generation Lima native, became the city's 59th mayor in 2021, making history as Lima's first woman and first African American to serve in this role. A collaborative and community focused leader, Mayor Smith has centered her administration on inclusive growth, neighborhood revitalization, and responsive government. At the heart of her work is a Better Together plan, a strategic roadmap developed with input from residents, business owners, and stakeholders. This plan drives efforts to expand quality housing, strengthen the local economy, and create safe, livable neighborhoods. Supporting small businesses remains a top priority. And nearing the end of her first term, Mayor Smith has shown bold, strategic leadership rooted in equity and progress. Through innovative solutions and sustained community engagement, she continues to lead Lima's ongoing revitalization block by block. Mayor Smith, Mayor Muryn, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today.
I truly do appreciate you both for your time. And so let's just go ahead and get started in the conversation. Mayor Smith, I'll start with you. You were recently a guest columnist for Lima News and authored the piece, "We Must Do Better for Ohio's Working Families." Walk us through your decision to amplify your voice in this way. And can you speak to how the state budget now impacts the early childhood system in Lima?
Yes, and again, I'll just start off by also saying thank you to Groundworks Ohio for the important work that you all do in making sure that Ohio's children have a strong foundation. This is a, issue that is very passionate for me and really led to the decision to write the op-ed. Because of my own personal experience. So, more than 20 years ago, I was a young mother trying to balance work, school, raising children. In fact, I had three children under five at the same time. So by the time I
Wow.
was 21, I had three children. And so I remember what it felt like to have to make tough choices between childcare, groceries, rent. And having come from a working family myself, childcare was not always available, even through family members, because they had to work as well.
Mm.
So I wrote the op-ed because I didn't need a report to tell me how expensive childcare was. I was living it. But today it's even worse. And primarily, we know that that was exacerbated by COVID.
Mhm.
And, with respect to the state budget, I do want to, commend the governor and the legislature because there were some wins that
Mm.
have already been mentioned on this call in
Yes.
terms of the Child Care Choice Voucher Program, which does bridge the gap. Between, the 145% and the 200% federal poverty level. It's already been mentioned that this is a $200 million investment that will help, more than 20,000 children statewide, including a little over 12,000 working families.
Yeah.
But as with most things, the budget, we kind of robbed from Peter to pay Paul. So this $200 million came from TANF, or Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. And particularly here in the city of Lima, this loss in funding is resulting in a loss of another important program for children, which is after school care
Mm.
that we were using to support. So, we're funding childcare, but there's also direct consequences that hurt some of these same working families here in our community. Particularly, this after school program is a program that we know that works because 71% of the children that are participating in the program have been able to maintain a 3.0 GPA or higher.
Mm.
55% of them are getting A's and B's in math. Almost 60% of them have increased their attendance. And even with that, almost 90% of them have reduced that or had zero out of school suspensions. And so I'll end by saying, as I did in the article, we have to do better. And we
Yeah.
have to find a way to support these working families, especially those with young children.
Well, thank you so much for providing such in-depth um, knowledge and just like tracing what the child care, what access to childcare can in fact do for children when you provide those key investments. And so we do know that there's a long road ahead, but here's a snapshot right here in Lima to show what happens when you do invest in the earliest years that matter. Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Muryn, I'll transition over to you. Can you share a local childcare and early learning initiative that you, in fact, launched for Hancock County? How were community needs identified and partners brought to the table? Please walk us through that journey.
Yeah, well, again, thank you for inviting me today, and it's great to be here with Mayor Smith. She's doing great work in Lima, and I always enjoy being a team players together talking about key topics. So, in Hancock County, one of the things that we have done recently, and I cannot take credit, I'm here as a supporting force of the Child Care Collaborative, and it really stemmed out of hearing from our business community and economic development, and myself all saying, hey, we have a real problem with childcare. It's been around for quite a while as part of our community conversations through the Community Foundation. And United Way and the Community Foundation stepped up and said, let's gather the data. We need to put together, better understand the landscape, but also have the data to back up and make the business case to our local community, local government, and other partners to say, how are we going to tackle this as a community? And in Findlay and Hancock County, we have the Findlay formula, and that is education, business, and government working together. But we very frequently, it is nonprofits and business and government working together. So we established the collaborative and had a strategy session. And one of the key things that I, think really has given us great progress is it's really easy to say, this is this huge problem. How are we going to tackle it? And there's so many different components. We're not just going to be able to solve it overnight, right? There's not really a magic wand to fix this.
Mhm.
But we said, what are our short-term goals and what are our long-term goals? And we very quickly identified that within those, there were kind of three main buckets that we needed to work on. And it was policy and advocacy, recruitment, and retention. And recruitment meant for new providers, but also maintaining the workforce. We're not going to be able to have robots caring for our kids. So how do we get that workforce engaged? And what are the barriers to getting a workforce, paying them living wages, while then also meeting the demands of our community? And that data showed us that we are a childcare desert. For every one childcare spot, we have 6 children waiting. And that is a huge economic burden to our community. So how do we expand the childcare available in Hancock County to both be affordable and high quality? And that, when we are able to make progress on that topic, we're going to really be able to have a huge impact on our community and our residents' lives as a whole.
Thank you for sharing that. And maybe a little bit of where that initiative stands today, and how you've been using continued data, such as local childcare availability, family needs, and workforce trends to really inform those key policy decisions. And Mayor Smith, I'll let you speak to that question as well if you'd like.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'll just be really brief, and similar to what Mayor Muryn has stated. I cannot, take credit And as you all know, here in local government, in Lima, we don't have a child care or education department. So we don't have the capacity or the resources to tackle the issue. And we did something similarly. Actually, my predecessor, we started an initiative called the Youth Commission. And again, some of the same partners, United Way, our school system, our Mental Health Recovery Services Board, as well as our Allen County Juvenile Court. And we rely on data that is put out by our trusted partners. So census data, and we know the percentage of children in Allen County that live in poverty. We know what percentage of those are receiving child care provisions from the state. So for example, we have about 17% of children live in poverty, and 60% of those do get child care assistance from the state. And then we also, use the studies that are put out by Groundworks Ohio. But the other thing, what I heard Mayor Muryn say is that we have our ear to the ground listening to the needs of our business community, our families, and really just trying to work together to use the resources that we have available to provide more access to child care. And also, thinking outside the box. And so for us, the after school program is childcare. Our summer parks program is childcare. And then one of the newer things that we started about 3 years ago is we have a program called Better Blocks for Business that provides exterior facade improvements for neighborhood businesses. And we've been able to use funding for that program actually to assist some of our neighborhood child care centers with much needed repairs that they have needed for their buildings as well to ensure that the children are coming into a safe and welcoming environment.
Thank you, Mayor Smith. Mayor Muryn, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, so when we look at where we're at right now and some of the initiatives that we've been able to implement, we very similarly are supporting a lot of the advocacy work of Groundworks Ohio. And we really tried to, from a policy perspective, identify kind of 10 key changes that we would recommend to the state legislature or for changes in the administrative code. And it really was a conversation with our local operators sharing, well, here are some of the silly regulations that are really not providing benefit but are adding cost to our operation. And so we've been going through a process, and I'm a nerd, so we use ChatGPT and said, tell us the exact lines that should be changed. And we're planning to go then to our state legislature and say,
Mhm.
hey, here are some changes that you can make that would add benefit and not cost the state anything.
Mhm.
And then our community foundation is really stepping up and is looking at starting a kind of a child care fund to support new business establishments. We're also looking at the kind of try share model and getting some of our local businesses to step up to help support their employees with childcare. Obviously, the federal childcare tax credit will be beneficial. So we're trying to do some education. And in that education, we've also been going out and presenting to groups like Rotary and Kiwanis, trying to just do some education to folks that, don't necessarily live it on a daily basis to understand the local impact, but care about our community's success. So trying to encourage them to get involved in
Mhm.
whatever way possible. And then, we're certainly excited as we go back into the school year. I think we have some good momentum to do education and little things. I'm going to be writing an op-ed to community members about just being a good neighbor. And hey, if grandma down the street, your grandkids may not live locally. Have you looked at how you can support other families in your neighborhood? We've lost so much of that social connection and your willingness to help your neighbor out. So I'm going to be calling them out a little on that.
Well, and sometimes you have to do it. Sometimes you
Yeah.
have to do that to activate folks. So, thank you for that work and that gentle reminder of this is a community effort and not just working in silos. Um, Along those lines, I think this is a perfect segue to talk specific tactics that both of you have used to strengthen cross-department city collaboration, as well as any other government agencies you found helpful and fruitful to have at the table for these critical identifying solutions.
I'll start. Mayor Muryn, I first want to say thank you for the practical solutions of going through the administrative code.
Yeah.
And I'll just also echo, it's always a pleasure to work with and hear from you. But for us, in the city, it's really about, creating a community of collaborators. And it's not just our city departments, which we do that. So one example is, our community development block grant funding comes through our Department of Housing and Neighborhoods. But we've been able to use that funding to assist some of our private partners, particularly our hospital, with converting office space into a child care center that is set to open in the next couple weeks. And so that child care center actually will have 118 seats serving ages 6 weeks to 5 years old.
Okay.
And it only took $100,000 from the city, leveraging that for other partners. The other thing that we do is we just make sure that we continue to communicate, whether that's internally or externally, also sharing data. So particularly with the involvement with our Mental Health Recovery Services Board and our Allen County Juvenile Court, we're finding that some of the same families that struggle with childcare are also some of the same families that have high absentee rates with children attending schools. And so how can we provide wraparound services for these families to be able to help them thrive in the community? And then I've already talked about the community engagement in the Youth Commission.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's really how we're attacking that work.
Thank you. What about you, Mayor Muryn and Findlay?
Yeah, so we're very similar to Mayor Smith, where we don't really have like a government department that is focused on this. It's really myself kind of just understanding the community needs. And so it's really been about understanding the JFS data, understanding those families, talking to our schools, as well as trying to it seems simple, but getting our businesses to ask their employees questions about why they're missing work,
Mhm.
so that the businesses are supporting their employees and identifying those struggles. Some of the things we're looking at, again, really at a community level, are we actually had a childcare facility that the woman that ran it retired, and now we have an empty building that could be providing care. Well, some of the things we're looking at right now is the Head Start was looking at potentially taking over this space, and the cost to be able to do that was too burdensome because of some of the state and federal zoning restrictions on a facility. So, we're fortunate that at the local level, there's not many burdens that we are placing on their ability. Now we're going to look at in-home childcare. How do we support that from a zoning perspective to make sure it's easy for people to be active? But it's good that it's not burdens by us, but it makes it much more tricky to fix it. So a lot of what we're doing right now is identifying legislative changes that we can advocate for. But certainly, again, also getting, as mayor, one of the best things that I'm able to do is bring together, kind of raise awareness, but bring different people to the table,
That's
maybe
right.
donors that say, hey, we need private support for this issue, or hey, community foundation, you're stepping up in this way. We really appreciate it. Maybe the city can help back you up in this way. So I think we're still early on trying to identify how we really support, because coming out of COVID, the landscape is just completely different.
Sure. Um, this next question is also for the both of you. As you reflect on your leadership, what emerging threats or opportunities are shaping how you approach addressing childcare issues and barriers for families in your communities?
So I'll go first on this one. One of the big threats, well, obviously just state and federal uncertainty, right? So many of our organizations, our local governments, there's just everything's changing on a daily basis. And so it's really hard to plan. And a lot of times the things that we're doing as nonprofit organizations or government entities, we are taking years to plan and execute and get things done. So that uncertainty it causes a huge ripple effect.
Sure.
Some of the concerns that I have is just the overall economic strategy related to onshoring and
Mm.
we already see that we have a workforce challenge. And then we have an aging population in the state of Ohio. Northwest Ohio is not exempt from that. We have a kind of a cliff of young people that are going to be going into becoming college age. And again, going back, we can't use AI to provide childcare. So it is a heavy human intensive program. And when we're trying to bring in all these new jobs, which is great, we want people to have high paying, quality jobs and be able to raise their economic mobility. But that's going to continue to increase competition. That's going to continue to put more stress on the child care system.
That's right.
So that is something that I'm watching closely, and I don't have a good solution to, but that's one of those
Sure.
threats that gives me pause on how we're going to address that. And then again, pushing for the federal government stance of pushing things back to the state and local level without the corresponding funding coming back as well. I think we need some runway and transition time. If we're going to have more responsibility and more financial burden placed on us, that's fine. We're fine to step up, but then we're going to have to figure out the transition period to also have the corresponding revenue to support those activities. So those are some of the things I'm watching.
Thanks, Mayor Muryn. Mayor Smith, your thoughts?
Yeah, similar to what Mayor Muryn just said, and if I have to sum it up, I would say that we are actively exercising our ability to pivot.
Little dance.
Yeah, there you go, dance. Except for Mayor Murray's a way better dancer than I am. Um, but as she stated, we plan, as mayors, we're visionaries.
Mhm.
And we plan sometimes decades into the future. And so I know for the city of Lima, we have been extremely focused on neighborhood revitalization, building back our neighborhoods, infill development, and really focus, on housing. And we know that that takes a significant amount of funding.
Mhm.
And so we are, coming, I would say, down from a high where there
Yeah.
was a lot of support and revenue and resources for the things that we wanted to do for our residents, and preparing ourselves to adjust our 2026 budget to be more of a reflection on those core city services,
Mhm.
which is heart-wrenching
Yeah.
because you see the needs and you hear the needs, but you also have to go back to, what is a city responsible for doing, right? And so
Mhm.
that is the picking up the trash, that is making sure the traffic lights are on, and all of those, again, core city services. And so for us, that means continuing to advocate with our state policymakers as well as our federal policymakers.
Yeah.
And I love what Mayor Muryn said about we need some runway. If we're going to have this responsibility, this can't be something that starts in 26 or 27. We
That's right.
need amount of time to prepare and gear up.
Mhm.
But also, we also need flexibility for cities to be able to create their own revenue sources. So
Mhm.
I'm saying to both the state and the federal government, if you're going to put these core responsibilities on local government and making sure that local families can thrive, we'll take that. But at the same time, don't hurt us with preemption, don't hurt us with unfunded mandates, or taking away our ability to create our own local revenue sources so that we can take care of the people that call our cities home.
Mm. Thank you so much for that, Mayor Smith. And what I also appreciate is hearing just that direct line of influence to our state level policymakers as well as federal level, because you see it on the ground. You are that ear and voice and visionary for our state level representatives and senators to really understand what is happening locally. And so thank you, as well as Mayor Murray, for keeping that line of communication clear, and open, and relevant. Mayor Murn, what advice would you offer colleagues? And this is also for Mayor Smith. What advice would both of you offer colleagues and other local policymakers interested in replicating models like the Youth Commission, like the Hancock County Child Care Collaborative?
Yeah, I would say by, starting with bringing all the players to the table, right? You need to all be rowing in the same direction. And this is a really complex issue. We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to solve it overnight. And it's really easy to just kind of get together and say, well, here's all of the problems.
Mhm.
But, how's the saying go? You can't eat an elephant in one bite, but you can eat it in a lot of little bites. And so really try to identify some action steps. Any little bit of progress is helpful. And then set out what are your local community short-term goals and what is the long-term vision of where you want to be as a community. And by putting together that action plan, you're going to make a lot more progress than just kind of saying, well, we need to fix this.
Mayor Smith.
Similarly, including individuals in the conversation, parents and families, but also private sector, nonprofits, philanthropic organizations, but also, going back to the really, it takes a village model. In America, we always center our conversations around, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. But we have to recognize that there are some families in our community that they don't have the bootstraps.
That's right.
So how do we come together to assist, but not only assist in a way to where we're helping solve the immediate issue of not having childcare, but how do you bring in, workforce development, education opportunities, and other tools to help these families earn more as well?
Thank you both. I really appreciate this. That was going to be my last question. What are the meaningful ways local policymakers can engage and include community members? And so this is just, thank you for providing that reminder, Mayor Smith, of how critical it is to make sure those voices of our families and voices of our communities are also included in these critical conversations. Um, any final thoughts as we conclude the panel portion of this webinar?
I'll be really quick and share a recent story. And so, for the last 2 years, we've supported a kindergarten camp program with our local community action agency, um, and had the opportunity to visit two of the classrooms last week. And so, these are 5-year-olds preparing to enter kindergarten. So it's 2025. So most of them were born during the year of the pandemic. And
Mhm.
so 10% of that entering class had never been in a child care setting. So we're now seeing the
Mhm.
results of not having enough child care in our community. Of those, there were some young people who came in. They already knew how to read. They already knew their numbers and their letters. And for me, that was encouraging because
Yeah.
although there was no childcare available, the
Mhm.
community is stepping up to make sure that our young people are prepared to enter kindergarten on day one. And that gives me hope.
Thank you, Mayor Smith. Mayor Muryn.
I think just have heart. You know what? We're problem solvers, and communities will continue to get stronger, and things can be a roller coaster at times. But I truly believe that we're going to make some really meaningful progress in the next couple of years, and so I'm excited to be a part of it, and helping lead it at the state level, as well as in the city of Findlay, and hopefully we're able to get some national momentum as well.
Thank you. Well, we are now going to transition into the Q&A portion. We have time for some questions, so we will address them, um, the questions that have been submitted. And you can also click the raise your hand button and we will unmute you.
Vanessa, can you see the questions that have
Let's
been
see.
entered into the Q&A, or would you like me to read
I
them out?
I just clicked it. We have let's see. let's start here. What are some of the specific regulations that you are targeting to make childcare more accessible without compromising quality or safety? And I'll let the both of you answer that question.
Yeah, so some of the items that we have identified were this seems so silly, but that's one of the things is our childcare facilities were telling us, we have first aid kits in every room, which is great. But when they come in to do a review, they literally count every Band-Aid. Where at for schools, they just come in and say, "Yeah, you have a first aid kit. Perfect." And your people are safety trained. They don't spend the time and, put them through the ringer on this. So it's little things like that. Like, how do we make sure that yes, we have safe environments? One of the other things that, is great that the step up to quality, wants those higher performing individuals, but to receive those higher levels of reimbursement, your teachers all have to have bachelor's degrees. Well, you don't need bachelor's degrees teaching infants, right? I'm like, we can have my mother, I always use as an example. She raised four daughters pretty much as a single mother, and she did a great job. She would love to come in and work, part-time at a daycare facility, taking care of infants or kids up to, 3 or 5 years old. And she can do that, develop those development skills, but she only has a high school degree, so she can't do that job. And so I think that we really need to look at what are the credential requirements that we have for different ages to be able to get more people into the workforce, because requiring individuals with bachelor's degrees for some of the care being provided is we're not ever going to win that battle, because they can go into the school systems and have, the summers, more flexibility in the summer and make, significantly more money, even though they're still underpaid. But those are just some of the things that we're looking at requesting changes on.
Thank you, Mayor Muryn. Mayor Smith.
Yeah, for us, so we've not taken a deep dive into the state regulations, but we have been looking at our local zoning. And are we not including additional barriers for individuals that want to, let's say, convert a residential facility into a home-based child care facility? Part of what we're learning is that, if you're a layperson, a lot of these regulations can be intimidating.
Mhm.
And so we've already started having pre-planning meetings with individuals to where they actually have the ability to sit down and talk with our building department officials about, what's needed and trying to help them navigate what some of the state requirements are as well.
Thank you. And thank you to Katie Holler, one of our near and dear stakeholders from Mother Forward, for that question. We have Garrett Thompson. He has a question for both mayors. How much do you work with single fathers or have male involvement? From my experience, single fathers or men don't get the correct information to be successful in the community or in the household. So how can we bridge that gap where they are more involved in the community?
Yeah, I think, and I'm guilty of that as well. I think sometimes when we do have these conversations that we're limited in our scope and focus and thinking only about the mothers. And so thank you, Garrett, for bringing that conversation. But I think we have to go to where they are. Are they at the barber shops? Are they at, a pickup game of basketball? And we also need to begin to have more conversations about the importance of having, both, male and female represented in that space as well.
Yeah, it is definitely a great point. In Hancock County, I don't think we've really specifically addressed or discussed that point. However, I know, interestingly enough, our Women's Resource Center has just stood up a program specific to fathers. And I forget the name is escaping me, but they are really geared on kind of counseling and peer support for single fathers or fathers that are trying to get back involved in their children's lives. And so I think that that's really going to be a great step, but we have not really singled out genders when talking about the solutions on either recruitment, retention, the parent aspect of it. But I think that that is a good question for me to take back to some of our employers. And one of the notes I made earlier is can we get our employers to, when they are hiring someone, do kind of a survey with them about,
Mhm.
hey, what is your current transportation needs? What are your current childcare needs? Can we connect you with resources? How can we support you as an organization? And I think that that might be a simple something for us to, again, get those businesses to think about and understand that people can't show up and be effective at work if they're dealing with all the chaos of life.
That's
Just
right.
like kids can't learn when they come to school, and we can't expect them to be able to learn if they haven't been fed or they, had a situation at home the night before. So I think we need to start asking better questions to be able to provide better solutions.
Thank you. This question is from Brenda Leonard. Mayor Muryn, do you have that list of 10 legislative changes you mentioned to the administrative code? And if so, are you able to provide that list?
I don't have it handy, but yes, we do have it documented somewhere, so I'm happy to share
Okay,
it.
thank you so much. Um, Dana, I'm I don't want to mispronounce your last name. Dana B. Ask, as someone who works to support student parents in higher ed, how can colleges and universities leverage their position as both educational institutions and employers to amplify the need for childcare with lawmakers, local governments, etc.? 1 in 5 undergrads is a student parent. That is a data point that she shared.
Oh, I really think that that is another excellent point. And I would say, advocating for funding to establish child care centers on site at the colleges and universities. I mentioned being a young parent. And so my children attended undergraduate school with me. They attended law school with me. And that would not have happened had it not been for two things. One, family housing.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times we don't recognize that, family housing is a resource that can also be included in your financial aid package as much as a dorm room could be. But the other is on-site childcare at the educational facility as well.
Thank you, Mayor Smith. Mayor
Yeah,
Murray.
we definitely are talking to University of Findlay has been a key partner in discussions related to the hours that childcare is provided in our community with a strong manufacturing base. We continue to see kind of that overnight childcare as a major gap. But we've also been looking at partnering with the university to utilize buildings on their campus to provide childcare to their employees as well as students. So that is an ongoing conversation, but we all know the cost of operating a facility and getting it established is a huge burden. So that's one of the things we're looking at is almost a like a revolving loan fund for establishments of facilities.
Thank you. Lisa Wackler, she asked or mentions uh, the largest issue we see is lack of staffing for childcare programs, which we did discuss briefly earlier. Many of these programs are shortening hours, closing, or can't have all of their classrooms open. What are you doing to help find and retain quality staff?
Yeah, so one of our committees is specifically on recruitment and retention. And so they've been looking at what are the current wages, what are benefits that can be provided by the child care facilities or other community partners. Again, looking at some of the barriers of the credentials that are necessary to be able to be a worker, because that is limiting, the ability for infant rooms, different things like that. Maybe you can have one individual that has the bachelor's degree and the rest are, don't have those same credentials, but obviously have all the safety training. So that's really what we're looking at. And then also education to the public. So getting out into our high schools, working with the kids that are interested in being teachers or in the child development courses, and looking for opportunities for them to also have kind of in facility hours that could help get them experience, but also help support the facilities.
Thank you. We're just going to have time for one more question. And as previously mentioned, the questions we weren't able to get to during the webinar, our team will review and provide responses when we are able. This question is specifically for Mayor Smith. Can you talk more about the project to convert an unused office space into a 118-seat childcare center, and how were you able to secure funding for this project?
Yes. So the lead on the project is our local hospital, Mercy Health. And it really started, the need came from Mercy Health having conversations with their workforce, primarily the nurses and some of the other doctors. What they found was the majority of their workforce are, younger individuals with younger families. And so they wanted to get into the child care space. And the conversation actually started happening in 2020 during COVID.
Okay.
And at the time, the Biden administration allocated specific funds to local governments to respond to effects of the COVID pandemic. And so it was Community Development Block Grant slash CV funding. And so we used $100,000 of that funding to support the conversion of this office space into the child care center. And as you know by the dates, it was a 5-year project. And there were lots of state building regulations that had to be overcome in converting an office space into a child care center. But we've been able to get it done. And the other thing about it is that there are enough seats to where it's not just employees of the hospital that will be able to use the facility. It's also a community-based facility as well.
Good, good. Well, thank you so much to both Mayor Muryn and Mayor Smith for your expertise, for your time, for your vulnerability this morning during our panel. Um, and we will get back to share a few opportunities. If you are an elected official, please consider joining our coalition for local policymakers. As we reflect on the recent state budget season, it's clear now more than ever that local leadership matters, as you've just heard from Mayors Muryn and Smith. Across Ohio, local elected officials have been stepping up in meaningful ways, joining discussions, publishing op-eds, and advocating for what families and their communities truly need. At Groundwork Ohio, we've seen this energy firsthand. That's why we're proud to be launching the Local Policymakers Coalition, a bipartisan effort to build a sustained statewide network of mayors, county commissioners, city council members, and other local elected officials who are committed to championing childcare and early childhood policy solutions at the local level. By being part of the coalition, you will receive quarterly updates and resources that can help assist you in your leadership and identifying innovative childcare solutions. We also have a new issue brief that will also drop in the chat. There are several ways you can act locally as well as mobilize your influence where it matters most. So we invite you to write an op-ed or letter to the editor. This allows you to elevate early childhood issues in your local media and share public dialogue and shape public dialogue with a values-based message. Adopting a resolution. This signals formal support for early childhood investments and galvanize community attention through local government action. Hosting a listening session that creates a space for families and providers, as well as other early childhood leaders to share experiences and inform local priorities. And visit local childcare centers. You will be able to see firsthand the strengths and challenges of early learning environments to drive more informed decision making. Groundwork Ohio invites you to save the date to join advocates, partners, and early childhood champions from across the state for Momentum Writing the Next Chapter, our 2025 Movement Building Institute. This day-long gathering will equip you with the tools, insights, and inspiration to help write the next chapter of Ohio's story, one where every child has the opportunity to thrive. Together, we'll hear from visionary, nationally recognized speakers, gain insights on the federal landscape, dive into what's ahead at the State House through a lively discussion with legislative lobbyists, and celebrate movement makers through a special awards presentation. Amidst a shifting federal landscape and a state budget with only a few minor wins, your voice and vision are essential to shaping what comes next. Momentum 2025 will help sharpen your advocacy skills, expand your network, and energize your efforts on behalf of young children and families. Last but not least, today is the last day for our matching gift campaign. At Groundwork Ohio, we're working every day to elevate the voices of families who are being left out of the conversation, especially as changes to Medicaid take hold across the state. Nearly 1 in 2 babies in Ohio rely on Medicaid. That's why we're committed to tracking the impact of these policy changes and making sure decision makers hear what's really at stake. Right now, your gift goes twice as far. A generous donor is matching all contributions to help us elevate family voices and fight for a better future for Ohio's youngest children. Today, again, is the last day to have your gift match. Please use the QR code to make your contribution today. I want to thank all of you for joining us this morning and sharing virtual space with us. Thank you once again to Mayor Smith and Mayor Muryn for sharing their expertise and leadership. And thank you to our dynamic Groundwork Ohio team for supporting today's webinar. Please stay connected with us through social media, and we'll see you next time.